All right, we are on. Welcome to another video on mouth breathing awareness. My name is Sarah Hornsby, and I have been interviewing all of my amazing MyoMentor graduates and students throughout the month of May to help bring awareness to mouth breathing. And today I have Anne O'Connor. She is going to share her story about mouth breathing. And I'll just really quickly say that the reason I'm trying to highlight this is to bring awareness to the bigger picture issues that can stem from or be connected to mouth breathing and myofunctional symptoms. So sleep issues, pain issues, speech, so many other things can be connected to these myofunctional disorders. So Anne is from Edmonds, Washington, and she is going to be sharing her story. She's a dental hygienist and myofunctional therapist she's just getting her practice started. She literally just got training, and she's excited to kind of bring some awareness to this too. So you want to introduce yourself, Anne, and talk about your story?
Sure. Hi, Sarah. Good morning.
Hi.
So I I've been a hygienist for 16 years, and I had never heard of myofunctional therapy. Which is just so weird.
Yeah.
Just before I took your course, just very shortly before I took your course, I heard about it from a friend of mine and a former coworker, Jill Bradbury. She called me one morning and super excited about this course she was taking on myofunctional therapy. And I talked to her about what it was, and I'm like, wow, that sounds really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like a week later, I was at the gym and I was getting ready to get on the bike and do my workout. And I thought, oh, I'm trying to find a podcast. And I thought, well, let me look for a hygiene podcast. And I'd never heard of it, but A Tale of Two Hygienists came up. And lo and behold, Sarah Hornsby is doing an interview with Michelle Strange. So I thought, this is like a sign, right?
Yeah, that's such a crazy coincidence.
Yeah, so I ended up hearing about myofunctional therapy twice within 1 week. And so anyways, I was really intrigued by all four of your interviews, and I could really identify with lots of the symptoms that you talked about, and I could pretty much check off almost all of them. It was really eye-opening. And so as a career path and just for myself, I thought, I've got to do this.
Yeah.
Besides, my clinical hygiene days are probably somewhat numbered due to a hand injury. So I needed to find a non-clinical hygiene path, and this came just at the right time.
It sounds like everything just lined up so perfectly, and
It
it's such a
did.
crazy coincidence.
I know. It was perfect. It was a sign, I'm sure. But yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So anyways, I've had issues with breathing through my nose all my life. And when you can't breathe through your nose, you have no choice but to breathe through your mouth.
Yeah.
And also through my whole life, I've had various health issues and symptoms. And what I've learned is that most of those, if not all of them, are somewhat related or correlated to breathing through my mouth.
That's
so
amazing.
Yeah. So I'll start with my childhood, and I'd like to share, some of the psychological, emotional, and social ramifications of sleep disorder breathing and mouth breathing. Yeah. And I considered whether or not, to share this part of it, but I decided to do it because even though it's hard for me and I actually still have some scars from some of the things, it's important for me to get the word out. There's a lot of social stigma around a certain topic that I'll bring up. And if any parents, if I can share my story, and any parents out there have kids that are struggling with the same issues and they don't think it's that serious, I hopefully can change their mind.
Yes. Well, I hope so too. And that's why I want to do this, so that all these stories can get out there, and that maybe, somebody who needs to hear your story will stumble across this and get some help. And so I really appreciate you. I know a lot of the stuff is super personal, and it's kind of, some of it's embarrassing. And so thank you again for being willing to share. I'm so happy that you are. So
my pleasure. Yeah. So just starting back in like my preschool years, my mom tells me, and I can actually remember some of it, recurring ear infections, like one after another from like age 2 to 6. So several rounds of antibiotics. And by the time I was 6, I had lost 50% of my hearing. And at this time, 6 years old, I'm in first grade. So I've gone through kindergarten and first grade, those years when you're starting to learn how to read,
Yeah.
you know, with hearing loss. So that's not great.
And it
And
probably took a while to get detected, I would guess. Did they know right
yeah,
away?
yeah. Something, led them to believe that I wasn't hearing well.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, so anyways, I ended up having tubes in my ears at age 6, and I had those in for a couple of years. And then the other big piece of my story is that I was a thumb sucker. So I think both those two things really led to me getting into a pretty significant mouth breathing habit.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Well, if you
Yeah,
can't breathe, I mean, there's a big correlation with the ear issues, adenoid issues, congestion, allergies, that kind of stuff,
exactly.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And, interestingly, I never had my adenoids or tonsils removed. So I don't know if that would have helped or not. But, anyways, so as a kid, though, I was really a tired, sensitive, and emotional kid. And what I've learned from your course is that, if you're not getting into that rest and digest parasympathetic sleep,
Yeah.
all of these symptoms, of course, are going to be present.
Yeah,
You
of course.
wake up in the morning on the wrong side of the bed.
Mm-hmm.
I would, you know, literally cry over spilled milk. I mean, I just,
Yeah.
very sensitive and emotional. And then in school, I had difficulty paying attention. I was at that time what they called a daydreamer, but we know that now as ADD, and
Yeah.
about the inability to focus.
Yeah.
So it took its toll on me my first, second, third grade, because number one, I'm not able to focus. Number two, I can't hear. And so I fell behind in learning to read. And that in itself has its own psychological implications on a kid
For
when they're
sure.
behind. They don't feel like they're smart. And,
Mhm.
there's a lot of peer pressure of, categorizing kids of where they are at in terms of learning. So, and then the other thing is I had several parasomnias. So I was a teeth grinder. My parents would tell me it sounded like I was chewing on rocks at night. And I also would talk in my sleep. I walked a few times. And then
All
I
signs.
also,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now we
and
know those are signs of sleep disorder breathing in kids, but
exactly, yeah. And the other thing that I alluded to before I started this is that I wet the bed, and that really took its toll on me, psychologically, because
yeah.
as you get older, and I wet the bed, up into my early teens. So in terms of sleepovers, going to camps,
Oh, totally.
any of that, I was so afraid of being found out and being teased by that. So
Uh,
yeah, and I had no idea until recently that that was actually connected to sleep apnea in children.
yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if that's, newer development or newer findings, but I always
Yeah.
just thought I slept too deep.
Yeah, and that's I know we've talked about this a little bit before, and it is I'm so glad that you made that connection, and it's almost like not that it's like worth it, all the like suffering and struggling that you had as a kid, but at least it gives you some sort of like validation, like wow, I really was
Yeah,
having like these are real health issues. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm
right.
just a deep sleeper, I'm just a weirdo,
Yeah,
like
right.
I think, even as an adult looking back all those years, at least now you have something you can pinpoint it to. And
Exactly.
I don't know if it's a newer discovery. I would say it's probably something we've been talking about for the maybe past 10 years. So that's
Okay.
newer, 10,
Yeah.
15 years probably. So when you were a
Mhm.
kid, I don't think anyone would have made that connection. No.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I knew that there was something, I mean, I knew it had to do with my sleep. I just figured I'm a really deep sleeper. I mean, when somebody
Yeah.
would try to wake me up, I mean, at times I would be combative. I wouldn't be awake,
Oh,
but I would like kick and scream and say, leave me alone, you know?
yeah,
So
and then have no
I
memory of doing that.
know.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem normal.
Well,
Um,
let's talk a little bit more about the bedwetting, because I'd like a lot of parents to understand like what's normal. Like, oh, that's just kids, growing, and that's normal. And then what's the not normal, past.
yeah.
I'll let you kind of share what
Yeah.
you
Well, so
want to
my
talk.
understanding is that up until age 7, um, to not be concerned about bedwetting up until that point, but beyond age 7, really, parents should be talking to their kids' pediatricians. And if the pediatrician is just saying, oh, they'll grow out of it, then to really kind of push on that and
Yeah.
see if you can get your child a sleep study.
Yeah.
And then also, um, start doing some intervention in terms of trying to help the child with bedwetting instead of the idea of, oh, they'll grow out of it.
Yeah.
I know nowadays they make alarms, and there's different methods of trying to treat that,
Oh, cool.
which
You know.
weren't around when I was a kid,
Mhm.
So I think the earlier you can address it, the better, for the kids' psychological health
Yeah, yeah, because
moving
even
forward.
though as an adult we can look at it and be like, oh, they're just kids, they'll grow out of it. But that impact, like when you're a kid, that's your world, is, what your friends think of you at school, or can you go to a sleepover or not? And so these things that are so big in childhood, um,
Yeah,
they don't seem that big of a deal to us as adults sometimes, but the
no,
impact that might have on a kid is huge. So
right.
I'm really glad you're bringing this up, because this hasn't come up in other interviews. We've touched on it. Like Erica's daughter had a lot of this emotional kind of, sensitivity you mentioned. I
Right.
know Melissa in her story talked about struggling in school, struggling with focusing, and always kind of, overcompensating with her humor and her big personality,
Yeah.
because she struggled a lot with learning, and had to rely more on like her personality to get her through a lot of that stuff. So
Right. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And
it's
I think parents don't want to, of course, kids don't want to talk about it because they don't want to
yeah.
be, found out. But even parents uh, don't really want to talk about it. There's just so much stigma around it. And that, in order for kids to get help, we have to start talking about it, and we have to start recognizing that it's not something they're just going to grow out of necessarily. I mean, a lot of kids do grow out of it, but some don't.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good to know. So, as an adult now, because this stuff obviously it doesn't go away. If you
Yeah.
just get
No.
older, it doesn't go anywhere. It tends to actually get worse. So, after you got through, teenage years, all that, like what you notice with your breathing, your myofunctional stuff, now that you can look back, kind of
Yeah.
bring us
Well,
up to where you are today.
right. So just real quickly, I'll go from teenage years to now. Teenage years up until age 26, I had recurring sinus infections, like super painful sinus infections,
Oh gosh.
um, probably about 2 to 4 a year. And by the time I turned 26, I was still suffering, and even more so than ever. I finally saw an ENT and had a scan, and I had a deviated septum and also quite a few nasal polyps. So I ended up having sinus surgery and having that
Okay.
deviated septum corrected. And so that really did have still a lot of resistance in breathing through my nose. And I'm in this habit of mouth breathing too. So I'm not using my new nose.
Yes, which is such
Yeah,
a it's such an under-recognized thing. It's just because you make the nose clear and you straighten the
mhm,
septum and everything is like physically cleaned out and you're able to use your nose. If you've been breathing through your mouth for 26 years,
yeah,
you don't just revert to nasal breathing. We
no,
really
you have
don't.
to
It
be
takes
trained.
practice.
Yeah, it does. And the other thing too is from a young age, like late teens, early 20s, I've always had these dark circles under my eyes.
Ah,
And, going forward, in years, like in my 20s and 30s, I would constantly have people saying, you look really tired. You look really tired,
which
you
that's
know?
really dramatic in itself. I never understand why people say that to other people. Like, thanks.
Yeah, but I did. I mean, I was tired. I felt tired, I
Yeah.
felt worn out and run down. and in my 20s and 30s, I was raising my kids and going through dental hygiene school. So you just kind of do what you have to do and push through it. Um,
Yeah.
and, fortunately, the sinus surgery cured me of my recurring sinus infection. So that was a good
Yeah.
choice that I did that.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Do you
But
feel
then
like
it's
your
like, I
sleep
don't,
got any better after that? Your sleep?
you know, um, I've never, no, not really. I mean, the parasomnias lessened, still talk
Hmm.
in my sleep and grind my teeth. But
Okay, so you even did that all through your 20s, the talking, grinding, all
yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah, I did. And then, um, where was I going with this? But anyways, in my late 30s, I started feeling like even more tired. I mean, I never woke up feeling rested. And after I graduated from dental hygiene school and got to work full time, um, I think just the workload and everything took its stress on my body.
Yeah.
And I was starting to feel achy and joints hurting. And I thought, wow, I'm really young to feel this old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was going to all sorts of different practitioners, massage therapists, and acupuncture. And I had a sleep study done in 2007, thinking, well, maybe if I can address the sleep issue, I'll feel better. And
Yeah.
that sleep study, the doctor, I had AHI of 6, so mild sleep apnea. And he said, it's so mild, you don't really need to treat it. If you want, you can get a
Yeah.
CPAP, but it's so mild. And I
And
thought,
we
well,
know it better now.
yeah,
Now we know that that's not sleep apnea, that's UARS. And,
right.
I'll just briefly explain it unless you want to, but
No,
um,
good.
there's so much more than just how many times you actually stop breathing. There's that whole sympathetic tone that your body might be in that's not going to register on the sleep study. So you could actually be aroused or awakening on some degree many more times a night than just that 6, but it might not register on that type of sleep study that you had. So
Yeah.
that's but at least you had it. I mean, at least you
Right. Yeah.
thought,
Yeah.
okay, I'll get a sleep study. But it's really too bad that there wasn't a better solution for you at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've kind of fallen through the cracks.
Hmm.
Um, but I did get a CPAP and I tried it and I really struggled to adapt to it. And so I stopped using it, and I felt okay about it because the doctor said, well, it's not really that important, or,
Yeah,
it's so mild that you can go either way.
yeah,
Um, and then in 2009, still experiencing a lot of pain in my muscles and joints and always tired, low energy. I had an appointment with my primary care physician and I stated, I'm too young to be feeling like this. I'm wondering if there might be
yeah.
some type of rheumatoid arthritis or something going on. And she didn't think that that would be the case, but I talked her into doing some blood work. And
Hmm.
I did test positive, not for rheumatoid arthritis, but for Sjogren's syndrome. And for those of, I mean, most dental professionals know what Sjogren's is, but it is an
Yeah,
autoimmune
describe it.
disorder.
Hmm.
Yeah, that the main characteristic is that it affects the exocrine glands, so dry mouth, dry eyes, but it also has many other symptoms like joint pain, muscle pain, and it can affect pretty much any system in your body. Um, and fortunately, I have probably a milder version at this point, which is good because no major systems are affected.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. But it's, I've made many lifestyle changes with diet um, but now I need to come back to the sleep part of it because in with any autoimmune disease, you really need to focus on keeping your inflammatory markers down, keeping inflammation down, and
Hmm.
reducing stress. And so, sleep, if you're not sleeping well, you're kind of in a constant state of stress in that fight or
Yeah,
flight mode.
inflammation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Which I mean, you sent me an awesome study, and I think more and more I'm starting to hear dots getting connected between sleep disorders and autoimmune disorders because
yeah,
I mean, if you can't get into that restorative, replenishing immune system building state of sleep, stage 3 and 4 sleep, your body's not recovering and healing at night. So it makes sense that these autoimmune conditions could start to set in. I can really see the overlap with the inflammation, not able to heal, not able to recover. It makes so much sense. And I'm sure this will be a bigger area that we learn about within the next 5 to 10 years. So
yeah. So anyways, I have a sleep study set up for myself, and I made sure to request an RDI.
Good.
Yeah. So I'm moving forward with my own.
Is it a take home?
You know, it's going to be in clinic, which surprised me a little bit. It's through Swedish Sleep Health. And they said for an RDI, they needed me to come into the sleep clinic.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, see what they say. And I think it'll be really good to know what's actually going on, from that perspective. It'll be helpful. So
yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to share too is that it's been great and really neat that in terms of the nasal breathing, the more I use my nose, the easier it is, for breathing. Like at first it was really hard, but if you keep practicing, it actually becomes easier and clearer, not as congested. So yeah.
I tell people it's like a 3 to 4 week kind of uphill, and then eventually it plateaus and flattens out and it's easy. What was the time period for you?
That sounds about right. Yeah. In terms of going for a walk, I struggle to continue to breathe through my nose, but now I can go on a walk and completely keep my lips sealed and breathe through my nose. Sometimes going up a steep hill, it's a challenge, but
yeah, I'm so glad that you're doing that. And did you pretty much just start focusing on nasal breathing after you got into this stuff and you're in my course and all that stuff? Is that when you first started it?
Really? Yep. Really. I don't know how I got this far in life without really connecting all these dots, but I'm glad that I found you, and I'm glad that I found this field.
Oh my gosh, me too.
Really,
like shivers.
Yeah, I'm really excited about helping people, with these issues, and kids that are struggling. I mean, it's so important to intervene with those kids, and then adults too that maybe have similar situations to my own that want to reduce inflammation and do all they can to be as healthy as they can. So
no, it's so true. I mean, the inflammation thing, it's such a big deal. So and that's something that I've been focusing a lot on too. I have like a lot of pre-autoimmune markers. Like I don't have any autoimmune issues.
Oh, really?
I think about, my skin gets inflamed like really easily. Like if I scratch my arm, my skin will get red. And I just thought that doesn't seem normal, And so, but, I think having that history of mouth breathing as a kid and all through my early 20s and stuff like that, maybe that set me up for having a higher propensity for having these markers. I don't know, but I was really interested in your autoimmune connection, and it's something I've paid attention to as well, just because I'm curious, and I know there's got to be a bigger connection there. So
well, the other thing I'll just mention too is that in terms of autoimmune diseases, sometimes a person will show markers and sometimes they won't. So just because a person doesn't show inflammatory markers doesn't mean they don't have an autoimmune issue. And there's, it's kind of tricky, and there's a lot of overlap of symptoms of different autoimmune diseases too. I know with Sjogren's, it's very similar to lupus. And so when I go out in the sun, I get a rash. And there's like that sun sensitivity. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Anyways.
No, it's so helpful. I mean, I think I'm just really glad that you shared this today. So thanks for doing it. I know we kind of woke up early to do this too, so I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Yeah.
Well, I think let's just give you a little shout out. I know you're just getting your practice started, but you're in Edmonds. which is north of Seattle. And so if anybody's looking for a myofunctional therapist in the future, I hope they connect with you. If there's any doctors in the area who are listening, I hope they connect with you as well so you guys can work together. Do you want to add anything about what you're doing with your practice or your plans?
Yeah, so my goal is to get my practice launched July 1st, and
Yay.
Jill, who I mentioned earlier, she and I are discussing the option of partnering together. We would each have our own practices, but you know, under one website and branding together. So I
That's awesome.
feel like that might be a good option, just because there's power in numbers, and
Yeah, and you guys are already
he
friends.
is
So.
easier than me. So
Mhm.
yeah, so we'll see,
Yeah,
but July 1st.
awesome. Do you have a
Yeah.
name picked out?
Have some thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, we won't say anything
Yeah.
yet then. I was gonna say we could share the name at least, but if you're not
Well,
100% sure then.
yeah, this is something Jill and I haven't really discussed too much yet, but North Sound myofunctional therapy or North Sound oral myology is
Cool. I
one
like
idea.
it.
So we'll see.
That's
Yeah.
great. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you again for doing this. I
Sure.
really appreciate it. And I think your story will help connect dots. I love the connection that we made today with the autoimmune and the bedwetting. And I think emphasizing that as part of your story, it was super helpful. So
Okay.
thank you
Great.
so much.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll let you get on with your
Okay.
weekend,
Yeah.
but have a great day and I'll just talk with you later.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right.
Bye.
Bye.